So today we're talking about how to get control of your emotions, but not using willpower, by using somatic, your body's awareness, and reading the signals before your emotions take over and take you out. So with me today is Kim Korte. Is it Kim Korte? I've never even asked. Kim Korte?
Yeah, it's Korte.
Korte. Okay.
Yes. Everyone always goes,
Yeah. Well, there's no lack. Anyway, Kim's with me today. And Kim's part of my vital cartography team, and also an interoception expert. So we're going to walk through what interoception is, that whole sensory dimension of yours. And some people in the highly sensitive community will be very familiar with this because it's the sensory system that keeps you safe. But those people who are not familiar with it will find out how it can serve you. Understanding this and awareness of this can really help you in your decision making and self, well-being as well. So, Kim, thank you so much for showing up. We had the same sort of kerfuffle getting on Substack's platform, but here we go.
We're here. That's what counts.
We did it. Wow. What's interoception? Tell us about that.
It is literally a sensory system. When you think about all the sensory systems that we're used to, they're considered exteroception, or exterior to the body. All the information's coming from the outside world, what we touch, what we smell, what we hear, that's all external. Intero, or internal, is how we receive internal signals that are going back and forth between the brain and the body all day long. Whether we're aware of it or not, it's happening all day long, this internal messaging, so to speak. So it's a sensory system that is designed to inform us, just like all of the other sensory systems.
Now there's a missing piece of, like, interoception fills in the missing piece of self-awareness, but what do you do to understand what's going on in your world when all of a sudden you get hijacked by your emotions and you missed it? You missed the signals.
Well, so first, what I'd love to do is just kind of take a step back and talk about what is an emotion and what is a feeling. So people think, it's the same thing, but they're really very different. An emotion is literally a chemical signal, electrical signal chemical signal that comes from the brain to the body. And it's meant to make you aware, just like you're aware of what you see, because those signals come in from the outside world, light. The brain interprets it and tells us what we see. So we don't see with our eyes, we see with our brain. So these signals are the same, but internal. And that signal then can either be felt or not felt. So if you've ever, I like to think of the emotion as the noun. It's something that we own. It's even in the dictionary, you'll see them as nouns because it's something that we have. Where the feeling is more of how the body responds, the action, our conscious awareness of it. So people can, and I'm sure you've seen this too, like people who are acting all weird and you're like, what's going on? Are you feeling okay? And they're like, oh yeah, I'm fine. Why are you saying? And you're seeing all of these signals, right, that are telling you they're not right, but they're not catching them internally. Mm-hmm. So feeling is the label, and then we label that feeling. So we name it anger, we name it whatever, anxiety, we name it love, blah, 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 all of those. So that's the difference. And as far as being hijacked by them, it's because maybe we've got like too many emotions and very few labels. So if you treat everything like it's a gigantic balloon when it's really a small pebble, or gigantic rock when it's really a small pebble, then your body is just responding to it the same way because it doesn't have enough distinction. It doesn't know the difference. So that is one reason. There's multiple, but that's an idea of why labeling your emotions is so important, because there's distinction in them. You don't treat every pepper like it's a hot pepper, right?
Right. Anybody who's ever touched or come near a Scotch bonnet pepper would know the implications of that statement. Yeah.
Yes.
Pepper
Or taste.
Scotch bonnet.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so that's why I think that they can be overwhelming, because unknown to people is that we predict our emotions. They're a prediction of the brain, just like what we see, hear, and smell, and the brain can get them wrong. And so we honestly start to believe our feelings and think that they're always true, and they might not be. And so this is why awareness is so important. Being aware of the signal, what's creating this signal, is that signal telling me the right thing? Like, am I responding to what's going on? Or am I responding to something from the past? Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah. And I mean, we've done a couple of videos now on triggering, dealing with triggers, emotional triggers, which are always going to be rooted in the past somewhere and stored in your energetic, circulatory system, so that somebody says something or a smell comes up and bam, you're dealing with it, like it or not, or it's out. And then you can either deal with it or just let the damage, watch the damage take place. So triggering, I think, is very much an aspect of that.
Yeah, it is. And if we always, so I kind of come from this line of thinking that, our traumas, if we digest them, so I use food a lot in my book. I think you're aware of the book I wrote. And so in my book, I use food as the metaphors for how what we use to create our feelings, our emotions. The brain uses sensory signals like ingredients, just like a chef would in a kitchen. It looks to how it's used these ingredients previously and then says, oh, out of all of the possibility of recipes that I've got in my kitchen, so to speak, this is the best recipe. And it predicts what we experience, the signal that we get, and then we go based on our history, right, with that signal, and we say, oh, this is what I'm feeling, and never question its veracity, never question, is this the past coming, now, and does it apply now? So we do have choices to be stuck in the past. We do have a choice to let that rule us. Like, people think we don't have choices in emotions, and to some extent that's true, because we can't stop having to go to the restroom. We can't, stop loving people, but whom we love or who we allow in, when we have situations happen that feel triggering, to look at what else is going on in that situation, and are we focused on just the things that are making the trigger and missing everything else? Because one thing that emotion does is it focuses your attention. So if there's 11 million bits of information a second, we're consciously aware of 40. And it's emotion that gets used to direct our focus. It's telling us, this is what you need to pay attention to. And is that the whole story presently? Probably not. And so by having that awareness of when that comes up, and then creating more recipes with it, so you can have that trigger that might apply it really well in certain circumstances, but to warn you, but in other circumstances, it might not help you. So then by adding in additional ingredients, your brain knows, oh, under these circumstances with this much information, we know that it's not the same responses we would have. But because out of habit, it just keeps seeing oh, this is here. So boom, there's your trigger. And, is it doing you any good in that situation? Likely not. So it's just being really aware and having awareness.
So how do you develop that awareness? Because I know in my role as a professional facilitator, I sort of started watching myself in the environment I was in order to know whether I was adding or subtracting to the context. Was I making the space safe for people? Was I, bringing too much of myself in because I really wanted to make sure I wasn't, doing that. But we are emotional beings, and the idea that we're not sort of means that, okay, you signed up to be a robot. Go ahead. But we know from the decision-making neuroscience that you have to have emotions, or rational decisions do not come out. So there's a lot of aspects to this. How do you build the awareness around what's going on for me? So instead of trying to use our willpower to regulate our emotions, we're actually using our body signals and dealing with ahead of time. Thoughts on that?
Yeah. So let's just take a step back to what you were talking about with decision making, because that's my baby. There is a work that was done by Antonio Damasio. He's a famous neuroscientist. I'm sure you're really familiar with his case, Elliot, who had no connection, like a brain tumor was removed, a really large one, from a part of his brain, so that afterwards he could not connect. He just couldn't. He had no ability to make a decision because he couldn't connect to his emotions. And the opposite is when we don't have any memories, we can't connect to our emotions. So we know it's this combination of using our memories, which I call recipes, and that connection. So I think that that's really, really important to understand, that any and every decision you make, when you take emotion out of it, or you think you're taking emotion out of it, or you ignore the signals, you can still question them. They don't have, remember, they're not necessarily true, but to not have that will diminish your ability to make good decisions, or the best, more optimal decisions, honestly. So because a lot of people are conditioned, it could be through social, upbringing, like men can't feel, or in certain cultures you're taught like not to feel. Experiences, like I had some really rough experiences in my youth, and I learned to push them down, which is why this became such a passionate topic for me. I was like, wow, like I did not know all this. And so it might be a habit or conditioning that put us in this position of ignoring the signals, or because they're coming, or just using other things to not listen to them. It could be drugs or alcohol, to kind of try and silence them. To get comfortable with those signals, I want to say this like a million times, is that just because we feel it doesn't make it true. And this, at least true for this circumstance. And that to me is super critical, because if you learn to question your feelings and not believe everything you think and feel, then you're going to have more curiosity. And what does curiosity do? It widens your scope of information that you're willing to take in, where fear narrows it. And so that's why fear is such a great tool to be used by many a control freak, government, religious leader, whatever, leader, it doesn't matter, husband, wife, it doesn't matter. Fear is a control mechanism because it narrows people's scope, their view.
Yep.
Yeah, their frame of ingredients that they can take in.
Right.
And so if you start to notice it, like, where are you feeling it? What is it telling you? And is it not true? And if you just even have a hard time with that in general, I recommend using food. So if you just get used to putting food in your mouth and noticing as it goes down, like what were the flavors, noticing the details, not just, oh, this tastes good. No, I taste salt, I taste pepper. My husband's a sommelier, so he has taught me how to distinguish the different flavors in wine. So flavor is much different from your average, like just taste, because taste is a sensory system where flavor is a combination of multiple sensory systems that's used to detect it. So by smelling the food, by noticing the scents, by the texture of it, like all of these things are giving you more information as to why you like or don't like whatever it is that's entering your mouth. And noticing when you like something, where you feel it in your body. And when you don't like something, where are you noticing it in your body? And then you start to like go, oh, that's all it's doing. You're learning, like, this is just communicating to me what I'm getting in the way of information. And you take a second taste and you go, wait, that doesn't taste like the first sip, because we predict all the time. So if you take your first taste and you're like, oh, this is terrible, and then you take a second one and people are like, oh, yeah, that's not as bad as I thought it was. And that's the habit that I like for people to build, because just like flavor, emotions are a product of multiple sensory systems. And just like flavor, our brain predicts it. And just like flavor, it can get it wrong. And just like flavor, we feel it in our body. And we notice then what we like and what we don't like. And when we can note the distinction in those flavors of what we like and what we don't like, then we can start to apply that to elsewhere in our life.
You know, what I love about what you've just described is it's that opportunity to really observe ourselves more carefully. And there isn't obvious nuance in all of this, because then, you know, when the nuance disappears, it's you believe everything you think and you
Yeah.
and feel. It's, you know, you just assume that if I think and feel it, it must be true, as opposed to stepping back and having that question around, really, you know, is that really true? So it enables that objective view, which, you know, comedy does beautifully, but so does a little bit of distance and more careful observation, and I think more openness as well. You kind of have to be willing to be aware. I'm thinking of a couple of instances where somebody's been exceptionally angry and they've thrown stuff, and they, nobody likes being pointed out what their emotion is, but they would deny it. You know, they'd say, well, no, I'm not angry. I'm very peaceful. You just tossed something, you know. so it's the awareness goes into being, you can't be aware if you're in the moment and in the heat of the moment. You've kind of got to step back, calm down, and get some composure before you can sort of say, what just happened there? And what was I reacting to? And all of those kinds of questions that enable you to take the next step in your mastery. Fair point?
Yes, that's exactly it. It's having that ability to be critical of yourself and to take your time. So in moments, you might not have that ability, but after the fact, you can replay it. Your brain has no idea. If you replay a scene in your head, you can feel emotion about it, and you can change that. You can say, wait, was that what really went on? And in that moment, when you review it and you provide that situation from that enhanced viewpoint, from that observational, I'm seeing more of the scene than just the few things that I saw, that's a new recipe. And that is giving your brain something more to use in the future. It only can work with what it's got. It's just like AI. It can only work what it's got. But unlike AI, we have the ability to step back, like you said, observe it. Or I say, take a second taste, be curious, and move yourself from fear to caution, and then to curiosity. because a lot of people can't make that jump. So if you just go, okay, well, I'm just going to look at it, because fear stops you. Caution makes you step forward a little bit more gingerly. You're not going to just run ahead. Where curiosity goes, oh, I'm not afraid at all. I'm just going to look at this. And the less fear we have around feelings, the greater opportunity we have to grow.
You know, what's interesting Stephen Kotler came up with something some time ago where curiosity is the flip. Stephen Kotler, flow research.
Mm-hmm.
You know, anyway, the flip side of fear is curiosity from a frequency point of view. So what you've just done is step that out. It allows you to kind of move from at least being semi-aware of where you're constricted. Like I find that if there's a fearful environment, my shoulders are up to your ears. There's a collapsing here across the chest, and your heart closes down because you're in protection mode. So it's that growth and protection dynamic. You're in protection mode. And then when you move into curiosity, it's more open, and your posture can change, and your body reflects the space of the environment you're in, the space of your mind, really. What's my mind and my emotional state doing to my physical body? So I think that's another indicator when you're in the moment processing these things, what's going on with my body somatically, that can tell me what these emotions are doing, or the emotional environment. Because I think what we've got now is an environment full of so much fear that people haven't noticed. It's almost running on a silent subliminal, that people they're responding to it, perceiving it, without actually being aware that that's what's going on. And so I think it calls for a more set of skills, more tools, more questions around how am I feeling, where am I showing it in my body, and all of that. What is your experience with those emotions and processing those emotions and bringing it to a place where you can take control?
Yeah, I don't look at it as control as much as I look at it as a friendlier relationship.
Nice.
And that it's not I'm doing the guiding rather than being guided.
Right.
And I am a control freak. I mean, I'm better at it now. But when you didn't have control in your life and life felt out of control, the desire is to get control.
Right.
Whereas I'm now looking at it as it's just information. And if I can either believe it or not believe it. And it's not going to kill me. And it's mine to understand and to adjust. Now, that adjusting might sound like a control thing, but it's really more of a fine-tuning that I try and do on a regular basis. I try and fine-tune myself. And it's a constant process. But there's one thing I want to get back to, is that we think about the body with emotion, and how it impacts us physically, right? There's a one-to-one relationship they've discovered now between your immune system and your emotions. And it's an all-in-one. But it's also impacts our relationships, to self and to others, and to decisions and to thoughts. So many people think that our thoughts control our emotions, when actually majority of the time it's our emotions that are launching our thoughts. Because when you look at what our brain uses, so when I have a presentation, a session that I offer to companies, and it's around decision making. And so I go through what do we use to make a decision, right? We use thoughts. A lot of people say, oh, I think about things. So what does it mean to think? Well, we use the mind. Well, what is the mind? The mind is an accumulation of memories that starts from the day that we're born. So then what is a memory? And a memory is whatever happened in that situation, all of the sensory input that was received and how we felt at the time and the emotion label that we assigned it.
Right.
So our thoughts are generated from these memories, and these memories hold the emotion. So not only do we change how we respond, but it also changes how we think and how we and what direction we launch our thoughts and how we decide. So I'm in that constant mode of challenging my thoughts from the emotion standpoint, not from the thinking standpoint.
Right. Yeah. It very interesting, Kim. I'm kind of thinking about a lot of things right now, and one of them is that there's a basic tendency to deny that we have emotions, and I think there's a fear of our own emotional state, because what if I open that box and I get a bunch of anger or rage or whatever it is, and because we've deemed certain emotions bad or negative and certain emotions positive, but things like anger can actually be very positive. It just depends on how it's being used. So when we start overlaying this duality of perception between good and bad, what happens to our emotional states? What do we do with ourselves under those conditions? What do we do to ourselves under those conditions where you're busy judging yourself for not being angry, or judging yourself for not being compassionate enough, or being too compassionate, or whatever it happens to be?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously physical, there's just global effects, right? I mean,
Yeah.
To me, it's like, it's global, the effects of it. But it honestly, it's looking at it in the situation. Like, I keep going back to conscious awareness, of like trying to be conscious, because you're right. I don't look at labels as negative or positive. And people think like, oh, too much cortisol running through your body. You need it when there's a bear in front of you, but you don't need it when someone's making you angry for no reason. Like, and the situation doesn't call for it. So to me, it's chemistry management. And it's understanding that your recipe does include the chemicals in your body. And so, understanding that emotions are only as good as what the outcomes are. So the positive emotion of love can have really detrimental outcomes. And I know this from my divorce and a couple other failed relationships, but it's not the emotion per se, it's the outcome from it. And that's what I think we're looking to understand, not manage, but understand and get to know better. And so when we are fearful, because I think we got back to this, if we are fearful of those signals, then we do lose control, because those signals are running and they're driving your thoughts and they're driving your behaviors and they're driving your thoughts, decisions, behaviors, the whole gamut, your physical health, whether you're aware or not. So if you're a control freak like me, don't you want to have more awareness into it so that you're like going, oh, wait, I don't need this. This isn't really true. It just seems to me like, why be afraid? You're listening to someone else. You're listening to what you were taught. Someone said, oh, I'm afraid to feel this. Well, you should be more afraid not to, because that feeling might be really wrong and it might be leading you to a heart attack. Plain and simple.
Yep. Chronic illness, direct result of unhealed emotional wounds.
In first-time heart attack events in young people without any history or predisposition, there's no illnesses, there's nothing in there, anything that should tell them that they should have a heart attack or cancer. Yeah, Gary's right. You should be more afraid not to feel. Oh, I think I said that. He's just quoting.
You did.
Thank you, Gary.
And Gary's amazing at pulling up quotable quotes. He's always been really good at that. So thank you, Gary. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions that came up. like if somebody comes along and says, I don't think being in my body works, what would you say to that? In other words,
I'd ask them why.
Okay.
I would definitely ask them why they think that, because somewhere along the way, they learned that. So I want to know how they learned it and what they think that they benefit from it, because then you might as well say, I don't need to see, I don't need to hear, I don't need to smell, I don't need to taste. And ask somebody who can't feel pain, then they are gonna experience a really bad life, because they don't know when their bone is broken, or they don't know when they have appendicitis, because they don't have feeling. So feeling is not just an experience of love or hate or sadness. It's an experience of hunger. It's an experience of pain. It's the experience of your heart racing. It's noticing your breathing. It's the things that keep us alive. The need to drink, thirsty, is an emotion. And so when we start to tamp down your emotions, you start to tamp down all of them. Like, you won't be as connected to the stomach pains that are telling you you have something wrong and you need to go to the doctor.
You override it.
I mean, it's just...
Gary's got a question there, Kim.
What are the most... Oh, sorry.
What are the most common reasons for suppressing feelings or feeling? My brother used to say, I have one feeling. It's a little more complex than that, but okay.
Well, there was some work by Candace Pert that said you can only have one feeling at a time, but you can have successions of them, but you can only have one at a time. And Gary, I'd say upbringing, not learning, being told societally, it's a familial thing. I've seen it across gender. I had a friend who was really good at suppressing her emotions and still struggles with it today because of her family and what she suffered. And it could be cultural. It could just be an experience that you had that said, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to feel again because this felt so bad. And then at that moment, you start to lose connection to life.
Yeah, which is a frightening thought right there.
Great question, Gary.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. Appreciate that. Let's see what other ones I have here. How do you create space before reacting when you're already triggered? In other words, the button's been pushed. How do you sort of use that space between I've just reacted and now I need to get control so I can respond better?
Well, first thing is, remember, it's a prediction of the brain and the brain can get it wrong. And I think that is the thing that saves me the most, is it's like, okay, what did I just predict? And then taking some breaths. Like, if you're upset, we know that breathing isn't just because some guru thought of it thousands of years ago and in whatever culture first brought it. Like, I don't even know, but it is a biological break to our, as one neuroscientist calls it, a do-it-yourself lobotomy. Because when your cortisol's going, your reasoning goes away. So it's called respiratory sinus arrhythmia, and it's literally a biological phenomenon where the more you breathe out, the more your heart rate decreases. It impacts your nervous system. Breathing in excites you, and then breathing out has the opposite effect. So taking a breath, but trying to breathe out a little longer, but just taking that moment. So acknowledging that this could be wrong, I need to be curious, and taking that breath if you notice like your heart racing.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm also aware of, in the Qigong practices that I do, they mimic what an animal does, or a horse, for example, does when shaking off stress or shaking off a moment. And it's just that body, just shaking the body helps just to, that's a kinesthetic way, a physical way of dealing with it. But I mean, I think that works too. We used to use centering in the facilitation work, where you're breathing below the belly button, deep center, but I'm not very good at that. And a lot of people who are highly sensitive are not, because you get completely seized up. You just, you freeze in the moment. And you need to, yeah.
I think it really depends on the situation too, right? Like, I totally agree. You want to disrupt, shaking the body kind of, it disrupts things, but it depends on the situation, right?
Oh.
So the least obvious could be a breath, but whatever you can do, whatever you can learn to help you, that's specific for you, because there's lots of methodologies, but not everything works for everybody. And that's what makes life fun.
Yes, and not in every situation either. Each situation will be different. So, all right, Gary, if you have any more questions, drop them in. I'm going to find another one here. How did you, Kim, how did you become calm all the time?
Oh, I'm not calm all the time. You can ask my husband. Yeah, he for the most part, I'm a fairly calm person these days. I mean, I'm excitable, I'm energetic, but it takes a bit to get me to mad. And my husband has a couple of surefire ways, and then I have to I have to stop. I have to walk away, and it's a little bit more of a struggle. But yeah, it's trying just to be. I don't know. I guess because my awareness has gone up so much that I think that's what helps keep me calm, because I'm questioning things so much.
Yeah. So to me, it's about expanding the awareness lens. I'm going to pretend it's around my head, because it's really, what am I focused on? If I'm focused on something this close, yeah, I mean, the sky might be falling, and that's the only thing I'll see. But if I can sort of back up a bit and open the lens up, you can see much, much more, and things start shifting perspective. I was thinking about that today. When you here in North America, people are complaining all the time about, I don't have the right makeup or color of lipstick or whatever guys complain about. Gary would have to help me with that. whatever it is that there is to complain about. And then elsewhere in the world, we've got no place to live, no water, just a whole lot of real survival based questions and conditions that make those kinds of things that we deal with trivial. And I mean, that's not to say there aren't those questions in North America either. It's just to say that in the certain levels of existence, there are different questions at play, and or different perspectives that we can learn from. And as long as we can switch perspective and see, if we look at it through this lens, what happens, it helps you stay. It recontextualizes your emotions, essentially. You're able to kind of look at yourself in a different light. Gary's got a question here. Is there a relationship between what a wonderful question. I love this. Is there a relationship between calmness and embodiment? I get an intuitive sense there is, but curious as to both of your thoughts. Thanks, Gary. Calmness and embodiment. What do you say, Kim?
I never have thought about that. I would think so, because you're more connected to your body. You're just listening. Gary didn't come in the beginning where we were talking about interoception, and it's literally signals that from the brain to the body that go back and forth. But when we get them from the brain, it's signals informing us, it's guiding us, it's telling us what to do, what direction. Do we go left? Do we go right? And that is being aware of those signals. And sometimes we get signals that we feel really strongly about, and we're like, I can't tell you all the reasons, but I just know I have to do this. And that is there's different people can say different things, but that's because sometimes there's more information than we can be cognitively aware of.
Yeah.
The mind and our brain has so much more capacity than our conscious awareness does. For every 275,000 bits of information per second, we're aware of one. Yeah. So that's why, having this practice of questioning our feelings, and if you've gone through the whole thing and you still have a strong feeling that tells you to go somewhere or do something, you listen to it, because that's when, you know, you've covered all your bases and you know that you're not like being mad for an inappropriate reason. Then listen to what your body's saying. So I don't know, does that if that answers your question, Gary, but I'll hand you for yours. What is your answer?
It's a perspective too. So, you know, in my world, because you're reading signals all the time, that prepares you. The signals that you get prepare you for what's coming. You have a precognizant understanding of or knowing of what might show up. And so I think that informs calmness. And the embodiment aspect of it for me is that the more you're reacting to outside stuff and shifting that into what's an intrinsic guidance system for myself, which is trust in my senses, trust in my, you know, my intuition, trust in who I am and my ability to handle ridiculously difficult situations. That's the embodiment dimension of it, that where those two tangle up, the calmness and embodiment, I think. Because I mean, I've talked to people who when they through COVID, and some of them are still angry that all that control of their lives got ripped away through COVID, and others were sort of like, yeah, it was just another day in the life, because you know they already deal with really tough stuff, and so it was something that didn't jangle their nervous system in any way, shape, or form. And so I think it's the whole business of paying attention to what's going on, picking up on the signals. It's like a way of calibrating your own resilience, your emotional resilience in the moment. And that's how it's works out for me, is the calm and the embodiment are closely related. And of course there's always the nuance of calm versus, am I just being quiet to stay out of the target zone? Meaning, you know, occasionally you might say something that will irritate people, and you choose the right way, the right timing or the wrong timing, and all of that. So calmness and withdrawal are sort of sometimes a close dance, and you're just paying attention to which one am I playing right now.
And that goes to that, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that's going back to emotional granularity, which I talked about earlier. So the more nuance that we have in our feelings, the more the brain has to use for launching. So I always say, like, if you have a recipe book of 100 Italian recipes, or a recipe book with 1,000, and yet all of the ingredients are quite similar, you're going to see a lot of the same things for Italian food, and yet you could have 1,000 recipes. So the more recipes that you have, the more the brain has to choose from. And by not labeling yourself as calm, but naming it as reticent. I can't think of that. And it's going to identify it differently for you too, because you don't want to mistake calm, which is, I find calm is a very lovely feeling for another situation. And so this is where having a strong vocabulary is very helpful for you and your brain. And even if you have to make up words, like you can have your own word that's just for you, that's a combo of emotions or a combo of things. It's just the brain knows to cook it.
Yep. Yeah. No, well said. I can't help but introduce an animal intelligence example, because I'm committed to doing that, to remembering that we can learn from animals and their intelligence and how they function. And what they rely on is sensory cues. So there's a great story in Animals in Translation by autistic author, Temple Grandin. Got it.
I was going to ask Temple Grandin.
Yeah. And she tells a story in that book about, I don't know how they did this, because I considered becoming an ethologist at one point, animal behavior nerd, but that's probably not what they would call themselves, though. But anyway, the story is that these prairie dogs have this prairie dog town, and a person walks on to the prairie dog town with a gun, and they know whether the intention is to use that gun on them. They know that it's a man. They know it's got a gun. They have a gun, and they I don't know whether they know the gender aspect of it. I made that part up, but it's just that they pull a huge amount of data in terms of intention, they understand intention and grab it fully. And the other story that I'll quickly share, and I may have told this last time, but polar bear, there was a polar bear that came into a biologist's camp, and he had his sled dogs tethered outside, and when the polar bear came up, he thought, okay, that's the end of my dog team. But no, the polar bear came into play. And if you see the picture, and I'm still trying to find it again, but the polar bear's got his jaw over the husky, and the husky's just like, well, whatever. It totally no fear whatsoever. So there's an understanding, I think, with animals and their sensory capacity to know what the intention is when something comes onto their territory. And horses would be an exception; they just tend to run. But unless they've had a lot of experience, in which case they don't do that. They will deal with whatever is showing up. They've just been trained differently. But it's just that idea that if we get really good at the sensory intention, that I don't think we are. I think we're a long way from that. It's when we get a hold of that sensory intelligence that we're talking about here. It's that understanding of what are the signals to pay attention to and how best to interpret them, how to stay open in curiosity to know how to interpret them, because there's so that's just one thought. I mean, all the predators could be run underneath that lens, and you say, are you afraid of this? Well, it depends. If you're afraid of a bear, well, it depends. If he's fallen asleep on the lawn, probably not. It's just these kinds of questions that show up.
Is he hungry?
Yeah, that's right. And the assumption is, oh gosh, the bear was hungry but they're not. And I just finished reading the book with Lawrence Anthony and his elephant book. And in that context, there was a big fire on the reserve in South Africa. And it's actually not yes, it is. It's in South Africa. And all the animals that would normally eat one another were all in the water hole. And nobody was thinking about eating. They were all, it didn't matter whether you were a croc, it didn't matter. You were all just there to survive. And that's, I think, something that we can aspire to doing. I think that we can aspire as humans to being more intelligent with our sensory capacities and to better understanding them. Then that's the beauty of your work and how it feeds into decision making, but also using it to inform how do we relate to one another. Whether we agree, disagree, any of those other variables, I think that's an opportunity. Anyway.
Yeah, and here's the thing: is that yes, dogs bark. We know that certain, especially underwater animals, dolphins and whales, they all have their own form of communication. They don't necessarily have the verbal words, to say, oh, but each vibration means something. The vibration of the bark, the vibration that gets produced from these animals, and everything is vibratory, down to the atom is a vibration. Quantum field theory is one of my favorites, and so we vibrate. We all vibrate. This is why we will pick up on things, that the feeling like someone's behind us who's ill-intended, like we can feel someone doing or feel when somebody's nice, or we like someone because we can sense or feel vibration, and we interpret those vibrations a particular way. So we do that with our animals. Like I have my little puppy. He's not around right now, but they get love whether they can feel it, right? Like they get the vibration even beyond feeding them and petting them. And so that's another form of emotion that we miss out on, connecting to the energetic output that is produced by the heart. This is something that is known, how far it travels, but everything is energetic vibration. There's work that's being done now to locate cancer cells early because they vibrate differently than the rest of the cells. So that's why people clap in harmony. It's because everyone falls into the same vibration of clapping. Eventually we all get attuned and trained. get entrained.
Yeah.
And we can get entrained by people's feelings too. So I always try and be, Huygens was the one who discovered the pendulum clock. And this was what, the 1600s, and it was the standard up for hundreds of years, 400 years or something. And he noticed the entrainment of cuckoo clocks. And so the largest pendulum was the one who that entrained everyone, all the other clocks on the wall. And so I always, when going into a room, try to be the largest pendulum and entrain people into good feeling, because we have that capability too. And it's so fascinating, right? Like, it's just so amazingly fascinating. We know this is true because we experience it. Whether we can explain it or not, it doesn't matter. So that's another way that emotions, and we influence each other emotionally. Yes, we have certain things we can control. There's another thing, or that we can implement, but we can also implement the news that we get, what we expose ourselves to, who we hang around. And if you want to feel bad, I can tell you, some channels to watch. It's just a part of the emotion process, and why feelings are so important.
Right. Yeah. Kim, thank you. Do you want to talk about your book, the next one?
Yes. My book is called Yucky, Yummy, Savory, Sweet: Understanding the Flavors of Emotions. Right. Because we all feel yucky. And I use that, as if you've listened to this whole almost hour, then you know that I use food and flavor and recipes and cooking to help people get more comfortable or better understand the process the brain uses to predict emotions, and how we can get better at it.
You want to talk about the other next book?
Yeah. Moment Zero is a newer adventure, momentzero.co. And that's for organizations, for leaders, because I think that part of the training, and it's still something that is a struggle for leaders, is navigating emotion and decision, and what it means. And so, because it is a filtering mechanism, because it does impact your thoughts, even before, it's like you pretty much kind of start deciding the minute that information gets presented. And so how do you get better at understanding that filter? So I'm looking at emotion from a filtering process, not a get to know, touchy-feely kind of thing, but truly from a decision process. What is that moment that it gets created that starts to drive your thoughts and your decisions? And that's moment zero. That's when, after the brain has finalized its prediction, it's landed its emotion, and it's starting to drive the direction that you're going to take, unless you consciously interfere.
There you go. Thank you. Thanks very much, everybody, for joining us in this conversation. Gary, I know it's late for you. Thank you for hanging in all the way.
Thank you, Gary.
Yeah, thanks to everyone else who is watching this, both live and not live later. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Donna.
A lot of fun. I'll end this now and look forward to some comments on the post.